Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is Voice of the Global South. All right, then let's get started. But first, 2026 is here, so here's wishing you all a very happy new year. Hope it turns out to be the best year yet for you. Right, on the show this week, Yemen's separatists announce plan for independence. The surprise move pits Gulf Arab powerhouses Saudi Arabia and the UAE against each other. Trump warns that the US will intervene if Iran kills protesters as anti-government demonstrations in the Islamic Republic take a violent turn. And a Baloch leader warns of China threat, seeks India's help. So is Yemen on the cusp of breaking up? On 2nd January, separatists announced to hold a referendum on independence in 2 years' time. They even have a name for the new country, South Arabia. The move follows a lightning grab of land in the war-torn country.
We announced the start of a transitional period lasting 2 years, and the Southern Transitional Council calls on the international community to sponsor dialogue between the concerned parties in the South and the North on a path and mechanisms that guarantee the rights of the people of the South within the specified time frame. This will be accompanied by a popular referendum regulating the exercise of the right to self-determination for the people of the South through peaceful and transparent mechanisms, consistent with internationally recognized rules and practices, with the participation of international observers.
Now, the statement by the UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council is the clearest indication yet of its intention to secede. It comes close on the heels of the Saudi Arabia-backed internationally recognized government of Yemen launching a military operation to recapture the crucial Hadramaut province, one of the main areas seized by separatists in December. Hadramaut's governor has been granted full military, security and administrative authority to restore security and order immediately if attacks continued. Now, the surprise announcement of an independence referendum means that Yemen, which was divided into North and South from 1967 to 1990, could again be split by January 2028. Remember, North and South Yemen were separate states until they merged in 1990. Now, South Yemen was the only communist Arab state and agreed unification with the North after its main financial patron, the Soviet Union, collapsed. After unification, the North dominated and the main Southern party tried to secede, leading to a brief war in 1994 that was quickly won by the northern government based in Sana'a. Meanwhile, in the north, the Houthi group emerged in the late 1990s, fighting guerrilla wars against the government over what they saw as marginalization of their Zaidi Shiite sect. After Arab Spring protests erupted in 2011, Yemen's army fell apart. Gulf countries backed a transition with an interim government in Sana'a and talks on a new constitution that was opposed by both the Houthis and the southern separatists. The Houthis captured Sana'a in 2014 and the interim government fled to the south in 2015 with a Saudi Arabia-led coalition intervening on its behalf against the Houthis. The wealthy Gulf Arab states of Saudi Arabia and the UAE form the backbone of the anti-Houthi military coalition. But despite a brutal decade-long civil war, the Houthis remain in place, while in sharp contrast, the Saudis and Emiratis are backing different factions in the government-held territories. So, why did the understanding between Saudi Arabia and the UAE break down? One reason is the surprise advance of the UAE-backed Southern Transitional Council in early December. The separatists now control large swathes of land, including the strategically important and oil-rich Hadramaut province. Their sweep through the south brought the separatist group within reach of Yemen's border with Saudi Arabia, in an area to which many prominent Saudis trace their origins, lending it cultural and historical significance for them. The seizure of areas in the east also means that the Southern Transitional Council now holds much of Yemen's modest oil reserves and production facilities. Now, even the takeover of Aden, the old southern capital, poses problems for the Saudi Arabia-backed government because it is headquartered there. Many cabinet ministers are loyal to the UAE-backed separatists rather than the Saudi Arabia-supported government. On 30th December, the Saudi Arabia-led coalition bombed a shipment docking at Yemen's Mukalla port. Saudi Arabia claimed that it was unauthorized Emirati military gear headed to the Southern Transitional Council. The Saudis did not mince words. They declared that national security is a red line for them and demanded that the Southern Transitional Council pull back from Hadramaut and elsewhere. It was Riyadh's strongest language yet in the falling out between the two neighbors who once cooperated in a coalition against the Iran-aligned Houthis, but whose interests have since been diverging over time. The UAE denies the Saudi allegations. The Emirate says it remains committed to dialogue, de-escalation and internationally supported processes as the only sustainable path to peace. The UAE has since pulled out all its troops from Yemen, which may ease tensions somewhat, but the crisis simmers as questions remain over whether the Emiratis will keep supporting the southern separatists. Sudan is another source of friction between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Saudi Arabia backs the Sudanese armed forces while the Emirates backs a paramilitary called the Rapid Support Forces. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman asked US President Donald Trump to intervene in Sudan when they met in Washington, D.C. in November 2025. Now, Saudi Emirati rivalry in Yemen has implications for global security. For one, Yemen overlooks the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a narrow waterway connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. And therefore, it is a critical maritime trade route between Europe and Asia. Any instability in Yemen will have a ripple effect across the region and beyond. Also, Saudi Arabia and the UAE are both major players in the OPEC oil exporters group. Any disagreements between them could hamper consensus on oil output. Yemen's civil war has been frozen along relatively stable front lines for years now. But the Southern Transitional Council's takeover of much of the south now risks upsetting that fragile status quo. There's a risk of reigniting a full-scale civil war with the Iran-backed Houthis who reject southern secession. So, all things considered, Yemen is a powder keg and might remain so until something gives. Iran's streets are once again echoing with anger and defiance. From crowded streets to social media feeds, protesters are openly questioning the government's policies. As Aman Kumar Himanshu reports, what is happening today in Iran marks a bold and determined wave of resistance, one that could potentially reshape the country's future.
The protests began on 28 December in Iran, where shopkeepers at the city's largest mobile phone market went on strike over high prices and economic stagnation. They complained that the government had offered no support to storekeepers battling soaring import costs. Soon, more Iranians came out on the streets, voicing their anger over the country's worsening economic situation. Iran's currency rial had crashed past 42,000 to the US dollar. Inflation had surged beyond 42%, sharply eroding the purchasing power in a country of 92 million people. And prices of food and medicine had soared, pushing many Iranians to the brink. The protest forced the resignation of the chief of Iran's central bank. The government had since appointed former Economy and Finance Minister Abdul Nasir Hemmati as the new central bank governor. By the 30th, university students had joined the fray, shifting the focus from economic grievances to open calls for reaching change. In several places, protesters have been taken into custody and universities have been raided. Protesters attempted to break into a local government building in Fars province in the south of the country. According to reports, tear gas and live ammunition were used in some areas. At least 6 people have been killed. State TV reported that a member of Iran's Basij security force was among those killed. The Basij is a volunteer paramilitary force linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guards, the ideological branch of the Islamic Republic's army. President Masoud Pezeshkian, who has less authority under Iran's system of government than Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, met with labor leaders and made proposals to tackle the economic crisis. He said in a social media post that he has asked the Interior Minister to listen to the legitimate demands of the protesters by engaging in dialogue with their representatives so that the government can do everything in its power to resolve problems and act responsibly.
People are dissatisfied. We are at fault. You are at fault. Do not go after America as the one to blame. Do not go after I don't know some other person. It is we who must serve and they must be satisfied with us. It is we who must properly manage our resources. It is we who must find a way and solve the problem. It is we who must make the efforts and find solution to these problems for them.
A video showing a person sitting in the middle of a Tehran street facing down motorcycle police went viral on social media. Some described it as a Tiananmen moment, a reference to the famous image of a Chinese protesters defying a column of tanks during 1989 anti-government protests in Beijing. But Iranian state television claimed that the footage had been staged to create a symbol. A jailed dissident leader, Mustafa Tajzadeh, said that the time has come for all those who want a prosperous, free and independent Iran to speak with one voice. A former US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said that the people of Iran deserve a representative government that serves their interests. Israel's spy agency Mossad issued a direct call urging Iranians to press on with the protests. Israel's army radio reported on Wednesday that a Mossad post on its Farsi language X account read, "Go out into the streets together. The time has come. We are with you, not just from a distance or through words. We are also with you on the ground." It followed an August 2025 message from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the people of Iran.
The tyrants of Tehran preferred sending hundreds of billions of dollars, not to you, to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, instead of funding your hospitals, your schools, and your roads. It doesn't have to be this way. I urge you to be bold and brave, to dare to dream. Take risks for freedom, for your future, for your families. It's worth it. Take to the streets, demand justice, demand accountability, protest tyranny, build a better future for your families and for all Iranians.
Some videos showed protesters chanting slogans in support of Reza Pahlavi. A member of the Pahlavi dynasty, he is the eldest son of Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Iran. Pahlavi lives in exile in the US. On 1st January, he called for the birth of a new Iran and end to what he described as 46 years of terror and chaos under the Islamic Republic. He urged Iranians to continue their struggle and appealed to the international community to support the protesters. The current domestic fury is, in some ways, linked to the economic distress caused by Western sanctions on Iran in general and the 12-day Iran-Israel war on June 2025 in particular. The war resulted in more than 1,000 casualties and the destruction of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Iran's economy was further strained after the United Nations in late September reinstated international sanctions linked to its nuclear program that were lifted 10 years ago. It left some Iranians convinced that the regime's ideological foreign policy is the direct cause of their destitution. The Iranian government is caught in a vicious cycle of its own making. It cannot stabilize the economy without lifting sanctions. It cannot lift sanctions without changing its core ideology, and it cannot pacify the public without stabilizing the economy. The current state of the Iranian regime is much like a tightrope walker who has discovered that the rope is frayed at both ends. It is unable to reform the country's economy without risking a political collapse, yet unable to stand still as the wind of public fury grows stronger. US President Donald Trump has squared the pitch by threatening further military action against Iran if it attempts to rebuild its nuclear or missile programs or if Hamas does not disarm. Iran is widely considered the primary backer of the Palestinian military group Hamas, providing significant financial and military support.
I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up, as I've been reading that they're building up weapons and other things. And if they are, they're not using the sites that we obliterated, but they're using possibly different sites. We know exactly where they're going, what they're doing, and I hope they're not doing it because we don't want to waste the fuel on a B-2. It's a 37-hour trip both ways. I don't want to waste a lot of fuel.
The latest protests are the biggest since 2022, when the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody triggered widespread demonstrations in Iran and outside too. Amini was arrested by the country's morality police for allegedly not wearing her hijab properly. A hijab is a veil worn by Muslim women to cover their hair, neck, and sometimes shoulders. The protests shook the Iranian regime and drew global condemnation over the violent crackdown that followed. Amini's custodial death sparked the Women Life Freedom protests, which continued into 2023. Iranian women posted videos on social media of themselves cutting their hair in protest. Soon, women from around the world joined the protest by cutting their hair in solidarity with Amini. Iran has seen similar protests over the years. In 2021, a shortage of water and bread ignited a new wave of protest. In 2019, protests broke out over a spike in fuel prices. Protests over economic distress broke out again in 2017 and 2018. 2009 saw Iranians again taking to the streets as part of what came out to be known as Green Movement in support of democratic reforms. And a student-led protest broke out in 1999 and 2000 against the closure of a reformist newspaper and subsequent police raid on a dormitory in which a student was killed. Iran is restless again. Crowds are gathering, voices are rising. Will something give? Will anything change? Aman Kumar Himanshu's report for DD India.
Balochistan is on the boil. Rich in resources but long plagued by unrest, the region is now at the center of calls for independence, protests against enforced disappearances and growing concerns over foreign interference. And now a Baloch leader has written to India's foreign minister seeking help. Aman Kumar Himanshu has more.
Miriar Baloch, a Baloch leader, human rights activist and writer who currently serves as a representative for the Free Balochistan movement, has written a letter to External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. In it, he has raised the alarm over a strategic alliance between Pakistan and China. He has claimed that China could deploy its troops on Baloch soil, warning that such a deployment, occurring without the consent of the 60 million Baloch people, would be a grave challenge to regional sovereignty. He has sought India's support and intervention in this regard. A central concern raised by him in the letter is the so-called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It is part of Chinese President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative that passes through Balochistan. Balochistan's Gwadar port, which overlooks the Arabian Sea, is one element of the project. The port attracted the attention of China because of its strategic location and direct access to the Indian Ocean region. It gives China the potential to set up naval facilities along the Balochistan coast, providing safe refueling and repair points for ships. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was meant to bring development to the region, but locals felt left out and ignored, leading to feelings of neglect and oppression, all of which has fueled resentment among the Baloch that their voices are not being heard, both nationally and internationally. India has long opposed the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor because it passes through Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which India views as a violation of its sovereignty and security. Miriar Baloch painted a grim picture of life under Pakistani control. He alleged that Balochistan has endured 79 years of state occupation, state-sponsored terrorism, and egregious human rights atrocities. He argued that the time has come to eradicate the festering affliction to ensure lasting peace and sovereignty. Maharang Baloch is another Baloch activist. She is in her early 30s, a medical doctor and a face of Baloch struggle. Maharang Baloch heads the Baloch Yagjehti Committee. It is a human rights movement that was set up in 2020. Yagjehti means unity or solidarity. In July 2024, the BYC organized a national gathering called the Baloch Raji Muchi in Gwadar. In December 2023, it organized a Baloch Long March, a 1,600-kilometer long peaceful protest from Turbat in Balochistan to Pakistan's capital Islamabad to demand justice for the extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances of Baloch people. 400 Baloch protesters, half of them women and children, held a month-long sit-in outside the National Press Club of Islamabad to demand justice for their missing and murdered family members. Maharang Baloch was arrested in March 2025. She continues to remain in jail. Mehran Murray is another Baloch activist. He lives in the UK. Murray voices a similar statement. He says that the Baloch live a life of indignity and humiliation every day at the hands of the Punjabis. Murray says that Pakistan's Punjabi elite supports Chinese activity in Balochistan, even though the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor does more harm than good to the local Baloch population. He says that it's like setting up a chocolate factory in Gaza and expecting it to work amidst war and terror. Clearly, the story of the Baloch is a story of people who have been systematically, clinically, and brazenly exploited and discriminated against, tortured by Pakistan's Punjabi army, and looted by China's communists. Balochistan is a land where anti-Punjabi, anti-Pakistan, and anti-China sentiments converge. Balochistan is home to major China-led projects such as a port and a gold and copper mine. China has invested $65 billion in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that passes through Balochistan and terminates at the Gwadar port. The Chinese have also monopolized fishing in the area. The Baloch have other grievances too. Balochistan is the largest province of Pakistan. It forms about 45% of Pakistan's total area. It is the richest province in terms of mineral wealth, but it is the least developed of the 4 provinces that Pakistan has come to occupy. Balochistan lags in education, employment and economic development. It has the lowest per capita income in the country. The irony is that Balochistan contributes heavily to Pakistan's GDP but does not get a fair share of revenue. The region is home to mining projects. For instance, the Reko Dik mine is famous for its gold and copper reserves. It is believed to have the world's 5th largest gold deposit. Baloch groups have been fighting in vain for decades for a larger share in the regional wealth of mines and minerals, denied by the Pakistani government. Then there is the issue of enforced disappearances. The counter-terrorist department of the government is accused of carrying out abductions and arbitrary killings. Locals say that the department is notorious for its so-called death squads. They claim that what is happening to them is a genocide under the guise of targeted killings. In 2016, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had brought up the freedom struggle of Balochistan in his Independence Day address from the ramparts of Red Fort in New Delhi.
पिछले कुछ दिनों से बलूचिस्तान के लोगों ने, गिलगिट के लोगों ने, पाक ऑक्युपाइड कश्मीर के लोगों ने, वहां के नागरिकों ने जिस प्रकार से मुझे बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद दिया है, जिस प्रकार से मेरा आभार व्यक्त किया है, मेरे प्रति उन्होंने जो सद्भावना जताई है, दूर दूर बैठे हुए लोग, जिस धरती को मैंने देखा नहीं है, जिन लोगों को विषय में मेरी कभी मुलाकात नहीं हुई है, लेकिन ऐसे दूर सुदूर बैठे हुए लोग हिंदुस्तान के एक प्रधानमंत्री को अभिनंदन करते हैं, उसका आदर करते हैं, तो मेरे 125 करोड़ देशवासियों का।
In his letter, Mir Yar Baloch praised India's actions under Prime Minister Modi, particularly Operation Sindoor, which followed the 22nd April 2025 Pahalgam terror attack. He described Operation Sindoor as a display of courage and a commitment to regional security. He highlighted the deep-rooted historical and cultural ties between India and Balochistan, citing sacred sites such as the Hinglaj Mata temple as symbols of a shared heritage. He also called for tangible reciprocal cooperation to mitigate concealed threats. Following a declaration of independence in May 2025, Baloch nationalist leaders are now preparing for a 2026 Balochistan Global Diplomatic Week to engage directly with the international community. Aman Kumar Himanshu for DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap. Once again, wish you all a very happy New Year. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.